Hello and welcome to another identity management video. Today we're going to be looking at the Graph Connector and Access Center activation. Microsoft Graph Connector is a connector for Microsoft Identity Manager 2016. It uses the Graph API to allow you to connect to Azure AD. It supports B2B account lifecycle management. So if you've got guest Azure AD accounts in your Azure AD domain, you might want those guest users to be able to access on-premise web applications. And what the Microsoft Graph Connector allows you to do is to take those Azure AD accounts and create them on-premise accounts. They can then use the Azure AD application proxy to access those internal web applications. Currently, that's the only supported scenario, so any other scenarios are not supported. And what we're going to look at in this video is one of those unsupported scenarios. The other thing that we're going to look at in this video is Access Center activation, which is a product from Oxford Computer Group. So just so I'm honest, I work for Oxford Computer Group. I think this is a really cool and neat and exciting product, and hopefully once you see it in action you will as well. Access Center activation is trying to solve the problem of password management for new users. So if you've got a bulk user creation, whether it's from an acquisition or a merger or new students starting, you can have a lot of passwords to manage for all those new users. So this can be time consuming for your IT department or the manager who has to deal with it all. And sometimes these new passwords can be really simple and easy to guess, which is sort of adding a security risk to your operation. And the worst thing that happens is the manager writes those passwords down on a sticky note, which gets stuck on somebody's laptop, and it ends up being there for a while. So Access Center activation tries to provide a solution which automates this. It empowers the user so they can set their initial password by themselves. So hopefully once you see the video and see the demo, you'll be excited for it as well. Okay, so let's look at the Microsoft Graph Connector first. In this scenario, we're going to use the Microsoft Graph Connector to create users in Azure AD. This is not a supported scenario, and you should not be doing it in your production environments. But I thought it was an interesting experiment to see how it worked and what the issues with it were. So let's create a user in our HR system, and we're going to put them in the cloud department, which tells the provisioning logic not to create the user in on-premise AD and just create them in the Azure AD. Okay, so we'll just set this user, and we can see that the department's set to cloud, and we can see that we've got some additional attributes at the end: private email, fact1, fact2 and fact3, and we'll see how they're used in Access Center activation at the end. So now we've created the user in our HR system, we'll go ahead and we'll do a quick import and sync to get the user provisioned into the metaverse. Once the user is provisioned into the metaverse, we should see that Azure AD's got the Azure Dev Embassy connector has got a provisioning ad, which it has, so that's brilliant. So let's go ahead now and run the export to create that user in Azure AD. Once this ad's complete, we'll just have a look and see what the attribute flow's been, and this will give us the first indication of why we don't want to use this in a production environment. So that ad's now been successful, and if we look at the attribute flow, we can see here that the password has been written to Azure AD Connect, but it's in plain text. So anyone who's an admin who can log onto the MIM server and view this information would be able to see the password and log on to that account until we reset the password for the user. We'll now do an import to get the confirming import done. And again, this is where the next issue with the using the Graph Connector in an unsupported scenario will occur. Because the password's encrypted in Azure AD, the Graph Connector can't read that value in, and therefore when we do the confirming imports, we get the export change not re-imported error message. Unfortunately or fortunately, the password field has to be written, so there's no way of getting around that. You have to write the password when you're creating the object in Azure AD, and if you don't, it will give you an error saying that the required attributes aren't present. So that's why the Graph Connector only supports the B2B processes so far. It will get you so far in creating users in Azure AD, but it's not supported, and it's not something that I would recommend you do in your production environments. So we've just done a delta sync on that Azure object. Because we've now got the Azure Object ID and the UPN that's been written back to Azure AD, we can now provision that user into Access Center. And what this will do is it will then trigger the Access Center activation process. So I'll run the export. Access Center activation is an Azure SQL database, and we're using the generic SQL connector to connect to that database. In this scenario, we've got an Azure AD account, but Access Center activation will work for on-premise accounts or Azure AD accounts. So it doesn't matter whether you're a mix or all on-prem or all in Azure, Access Center activation will work for you. So now that that's written back to the Access Center database, what should hopefully happen is that we will get an email notification which includes a link that will take us to the Access Center activation portal. Now this link is encrypted, it's secure, it's got a random string in it so that it can't be spoofed or faked, so no one else is going to be able to use this link. We've got the logo in there, we've got the introduction text, and we've got the link that we can click. And when we click the link, we can see up here that the URL is quite complex and it's going to be difficult to replicate that. With this demo environment, it's just an out-of-the-box Access Center activation, but all of this is customizable. You can have an image, you can style it however you want. We'll click continue, and what it's going to now do is ask me to confirm those personal facts, and this is what we entered into the HR system at the start. Again, these are all customizable, so you might not want to have the date of birth or the name of the pet, you might want to have an employee number or a student ID, and you could potentially send those details out to the user in the post. For the date of birth, I've entered today's date, and I've put Fido as the pet name. So I'll click continue now, and it's now confirming that the details that I entered in the database match up to what I've just submitted there. So it's now asking me for a new password. So we saw that the password was just sort of a password in a texty string, but I'm going to copy this password in so that you know that I'm not cheating when we try to log into Office 365. But that's now using Access Center, so without anyone having to do anything, without a manager, without anyone in IT having to do anything at all, the user's been sent an email to their personal address, which has allowed them to verify who they are. You can also include multi-factor authentication in there as well, so it contacts them on their personal phone number to sort of give them the multi-factor authentication experience to make it even more secure. And they've been able to verify and set their password to log on with. I think this is really cool, really exciting. It's going to make life so much easier for IT and manager. So hopefully you're excited by it as I am. So what we want to do now is log in. So we'll put the account name in. We'll hit next. We'll put the password in. And that has now successfully logged us in to our Azure account, and we can access any of the applications that we have access to. Hopefully you've found that as exciting as I have, as good as I have, because it really is going to make IT departments' life and managers' life a lot easier. So, in summary, we've had a look at the Microsoft Graph Connector in an unsupported scenario. If you want to see a demo of it being used in a supported scenario, David and Jeff did a great video. I'll include a link in the description below, and it shows a guest Azure AD account accessing the internal web applications. We've also had a look at Access Center activation, how it makes the life a lot easier for a new user. They don't need to worry about contacting IT or their manager to get the password reset, and it means we haven't got to worry about any more sticky notes with the passwords appearing where we don't want them to. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions or queries, please leave them in the comment section below or send me a tweet. Thanks for watching, and see you again soon.